He had everything: money, power, legacy. But when his time came, no one showed up at the funeral. Not a friend, not a family member. Just two employees, standing awkwardly in the back waiting for it to end. Arthur was once on the cover of magazines, celebrated in business schools, applauded on stages. But behind closed doors, behind that billion-dollar empire, there was silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that echoes with everything you lost but didn't notice slipping away. How does someone climb that high, only to fall so far inside? This isn't just a story about a rich man who died alone. It's a warning, because some victories don't feel like winning when you realize what they cost. And the worst part? He saw it coming, and kept going anyway. Arthur didn't grow up with much. No wealth, no legacy, not even real encouragement. Just a small apartment, paper-thin walls, and nights where his parents argued about bills in whispers they thought the kids couldn't hear. He wasn't the smartest in his class, not the most popular, but he learned early how to keep his head down and listen. And deep beneath the quiet, he built something louder than any voice around him, a need to prove himself. Every time someone said, "That's not for people like us," he stored it like fuel. He worked hard, obsessed even, not out of love for money, but for what he thought it would mean. "When I make it," he'd say silently, "they'll finally see me." At 21, he turned down parties to stay home and code in a cramped room. At 23, he launched his first startup, failed, launched another, almost failed again, but he kept going. Every obstacle was proof he hadn't earned it yet. It wasn't about joy. It was about validation, and that's what made the hunger impossible to satisfy. Arthur's startup finally clicked when he was 27. Nothing massive, just enough to catch investors' attention. That was all he needed. Money started flowing, meetings got bigger, and suddenly, he was on the radar. He got married during this time. Her name was Clara. Bright eyes, patient heart. She believed in him before the world did. In the beginning, love was enough, but success has a way of shifting your focus from who you're doing it for to how much more you can gain. Arthur missed their first anniversary because of a pitch meeting in New York. He told himself it was temporary. She cried alone at a dinner table set for two. When their daughter Sophia was born, he promised to be present. He held her once, took a few photos, and was back on a flight the next morning. Each time he said the same thing: "I'm building something bigger, for us," and he believed it. That made it easier. But Clara started to grow silent. Sophia stopped asking when Daddy would be home. And Arthur? He saw the distance forming, but convinced himself it was just part of the process. It wasn't neglect, it was ambition. By his early 40s, Arthur had become a household name, lauded as a visionary founder, a genius of innovation, a self-made billionaire. His face was on magazine covers. His company's valuation soared. He was invited to private conferences with presidents, featured on podcasts that reached millions. Investors adored him. Strangers followed his every move, and yet, inside the tallest glass building overlooking the entire skyline, Arthur's world had never felt smaller. The more he earned, the more he worked. The more he worked, the more he distanced himself from real life, from meals with Clara, from bedtime stories with Sophia, from moments that don't return. They moved into a mansion, but it only made the silence louder. He sent gifts instead of showing up, called instead of coming, said, "It's just a busy season." But the truth was brutal. It wasn't a season. It had become who he was. Clara left him quietly one night. No yelling, no drama, just a letter, her wedding ring, and a final photo of him, Sophia, and a birthday cake he wasn't there to share. He stared at that photo longer than any contract he'd signed. But that same night, he closed the biggest deal of his life. He didn't celebrate, he worked, because the empire had grown too big to pause, and the hole inside him was now part of its foundation. Arthur still attended the galas, delivered keynote speeches, smiled on stages bathed in spotlight. Cameras loved him. Audiences hung on every word. But after each standing ovation came the same ritual: a car ride home, in silence. Dinner for one, barely touched. Dozens of unread messages, none from family. He'd scroll through social media late at night, seeing snapshots of lives he used to live, school plays, beach vacations, arms wrapped around people who mattered. Meanwhile, he sat alone in a penthouse that echoed, even with all its elegance. His daughter had stopped returning his calls. Clara had rebuilt her life, this time without him in it. He sent expensive gifts on birthdays. They were returned. Arthur called it the cost of greatness, a phrase he repeated to himself so often it stopped sounding like a lie. On the outside, he was unstoppable, but the version of him that used to laugh, to feel, to be present, had vanished, replaced by a carefully curated figurehead. He had built a monument to success, piece by piece, and now lived as its prisoner, guarded, admired, totally alone. The moment came quietly. Arthur's mother passed away on a Tuesday morning. The funeral was scheduled for Friday. He was notified respectfully by his assistant. But Friday? That was the day of his company's long-awaited merger signing. A multi-billion-dollar deal that would cement his legacy. He didn't even hesitate. He didn't go. He sent flowers, paid for everything, and scheduled back-to-back interviews. When the pen touched the contract, cameras flashed, smiles everywhere. But that night, when he looked in the mirror, He wasn't smiling. That was the last family funeral he was ever invited to. A few months later, he learned his daughter had given birth. Her first child. Arthur hadn't even known she was pregnant. She hadn't told him. No one had. That broke something in him, but softly, like the last crack in a frozen lake before it gives way. He tried to call. She declined. He tried again. Nothing. The world saw him as the model of focus and discipline, but inside he was split in two. Half empire, half ghost. And from that day on, he stopped trying to fix what was broken, because he finally realized it was too late. Years later, Arthur received the highest honor in his field, a Lifetime Achievement Award, handed to him on stage at a global tech summit. The audience stood, applauded, roared. One more trophy for the shelf, another headline, another milestone. In his acceptance speech, he spoke about sacrifice, about vision, about never giving up. People were inspired. But backstage, when the cameras stopped rolling, he sat alone in his dressing room. No text from Sophia, no voice message from Clara, not even a card, just silence. He picked up the glass award, turned it in his hands. It reflected back a man he barely recognized. Gray hair, tired eyes, decades of noise, all leading to this moment. He ordered a car, went home to his penthouse. He placed the trophy quietly on a high shelf next to 20 others, untouched by fingerprints or meaning. Made himself a drink, sat on the balcony, looked out at the empire he'd built. So many businesses, so many cities, so many strangers who knew his name, and not a single soul left who called him Dad. In that moment, he finally admitted to himself he'd won, but at what cost? Arthur died on a Tuesday morning, quiet, peaceful, in a chair by the window overlooking everything he had built. A cleaner found him hours later. The news didn't take long to spread. Visionary entrepreneur passes at 67. Tributes flooded in, from CEOs, journalists, world leaders. His name trended for a full day, but in the funeral hall, only 2 people showed up. Both were longtime employees, not friends, not family. They stood awkwardly near the back, unsure if they even belonged there. No daughter, no ex-wife, no soft hands to say goodbye, no one to whisper, "I forgive you." His will left billions to charitable foundations, startup incubators, tech scholarships around the world. Not a cent to his daughter. She had refused it before he was even gone. He left behind everything the world defines as legacy. Buildings with his name, schools with his face on the wall, quotes framed in boardrooms, but no one waiting at home. No old family photos on the mantle. No inbox filled with miss you messages, not even one. In the end, the empire lived on. But the man? He vanished, without anyone ever asking where he went. This is not just Arthur's story. It's ours. Because maybe you're not chasing billions, but maybe you're chasing something. A title, a number in your bank account, a version of yourself that you think will finally be enough. And in that chase, maybe you're starting to trade the things no one can return. Time at the dinner table, bedtime conversations, the sound of someone you love laughing in the next room. Don't wait for the silence to make you realize what noise you really needed. Arthur didn't choose to die alone. He just chose one thing too many times, until the other things stopped waiting for him. You might think, just this year, or they'll understand one day. But people aren't investments. They don't yield returns if you ignore them long enough. The hardest part about his story, there were 1,000 moments where he could have turned back. He just never thought the end would come so soon. So ask yourself now, before it's too late, what are you sacrificing today in the name of success? And when you finally get there, will there be someone left who still remembers why you started? Because wealth is powerful, but presence, that's priceless.